Tour guides of Reddit, what's the worst thing a tourist has ever done under your supervision? Some years ago, we took our kids to Washington DC for a long Easter weekend. We were waiting for the Air and Space Museum to open, and some guy was in line behind us with a kid about 8 talking loudly on his cell phone about whether his recent business failure/bankruptcy would hinder getting a mortgage for a beach house. Dude, leave your kids out of these discussions completely. Also, do you really want me to overhear this? This happened probably in 2002, and I still use it as an example of what not to do when having sensitive conversations. Some years ago, we took our kids to Washington DC for a long Easter weekend. We were waiting for the Air and Space Museum to open, and some guy was in line behind us with a kid about 8 talking loudly on his cell phone about whether his recent business failure/bankruptcy would hinder getting a mortgage for a beach house. Dude, leave your kids out of these discussions completely. Also, do you really want me to overhear this? This happened probably in 2002, and I still use it as an example of what not to do when having sensitive conversations. I was giving a tour of my university to the mother of a potential student. She tried to recruit me into a popular pyramid scheme, and then, when I tried to change the subject by asking what she did in her spare time, she told me about her conspiracy theories that she gives public talks on. They included the dangers of Wi-Fi, 5G, and chemtrails, and that the moon landings were faked by Stanley Kubrick, who was shortly thereafter assassinated by the CIA and replaced by a clone. I cut the tour short. Felt pretty sorry for her daughter, who appeared to think these theories were reasonable and had also been recruited into her mother's pyramid scheme at 17. Wi-Fi? Oh, the university campus is absolutely blanketed with Wi-Fi coverage. I'm amazed you're even standing. Not a tour guide, but I guess you could say I work in the tourism industry. I work ground crew for a company that does helicopter tours. Number 1 rule for customers is, don't walk under the tail boom, the rotor will kill you, and it will hurt. It's unbelievable how many people have a death wish out there. People see the fastest way to the other side of the helicopter and don't stop to think, oh hey, that spinning blade may or may not slice my whole fucking head off, let's see how close we can get to it. Couple of guys I used to play cricket with went on a school trip to Auschwitz and decided to steal a small pair of glasses and some buttons they found half buried in the ground. They were detained by Polish police while they were leaving the site. Hard to know what goes through people's heads sometimes. On the subject of Auschwitz, I work with a dude whose go-to badass story is that he snorted coke while walking around Auschwitz. I've probably heard him tell 25 people or so the same story, and every person kind of looks at him like he's a fucking piece of shit, and then they try and change the subject. To this day I don't think he understands why no one sees it as badass. I have a coworker who tells a similar, but not nearly as offensive, story as your coworker, and apparently I was the first person ever to tell her that story isn't funny and really does not reflect well on you. I'd stop telling it. She had been telling the story for 5 years. During my summers in college, I worked as a raft guide on a whitewater river in the southeast. It wasn't a difficult job. The 2 biggest things we were responsible for were running our trips in a timely manner and ensuring that the guests in our boat had a fun and safe trip down the river. The safety part is important because people visiting the river frequently forget that it is a natural wilderness feature and carries all of the associated dangers. We frequently received questions about whether the rafts were on tracks, whether I actually had to do anything in the back, and, my personal favorite, whether the river went in a circle and we would end up back where we started. This last question was particularly funny because we took a bus from the rafting outpost to the put-in of the river. Why bother if we were going in a circle? One summer afternoon, I had a boat with 3 groups of 2 people. One of those groups was a mother and son. The mother seemed nice, if timid, as did the son. However, as I was going through the routine of explaining the safety concerns and paddle commands, it started to dawn on me that he was not very bright. There was nothing wrong with him. He was just dumb as shit. Once we were on the river, he almost immediately developed a habit of checking the depth of the water with his paddle. He would incessantly plunge the blade into the water without care nor concern for his surroundings and circumstances. The water on this river is pristine, almost crystal clear. The riverbed is visible almost constantly, and still, this young man felt the need to verify the veracity of his own eyeballs by shoving his paddle into the river like some sort of deranged perpetual motion machine. Of course, I warned him against his actions. At first, my concerns were that his depth checking interferes with his ability to follow my commands and paddle. Eventually, however, my pleading grew more desperate as it dawned on me that this child paid no deference to my authority. He answered only to chaos. It finally came to a head when, in a portion of the river that was extremely shallow, probably no more than a foot deep, he plunged his paddle into the riverbed with a force that shook the surrounding countryside. Like Excalibur, the paddle wedged itself among the rocks, perfectly erect. The boy, with a stayed iron grip that could only be wielded by someone incredibly dense, kept his hand on the paddle as the rushing water carried us away from its new location. In one swift motion, he was wrenched from the raft and landed in a foot of water. He wore a face of bewildered idiocy. It was quite satisfying to keep his paddle in the back with me for the remainder of the trip after I returned him safely to the raft. All he could do was stare wistfully at the riverbed, his poo brain longing to verify its depth. This reminded me of last summer. I was walking back from the beach with my young kids and the biggest black bear I've ever seen ambled out in front of us. We stopped, backed up slowly, and watched him scratch on a tree near the path from a safe distance. This lady in heels and a fur wrap goes strolling past us, and I reach out and tap her shoulder and tell her to stop, pointing to the huge bear. But my car is that way. She snapped. Yes, I whispered, mine too, but we have to wait for the bear to leave. She was so upset at getting delayed by a bear that she turned around to try and find another route. There isn't one. The bear wandered off into the woods less than a minute later. Saw a kid knock over a set of replica Civil War rifles that were on display, and then his mom got mad at the tour guide for yelling at him. The kid and his mom were kicked off the Civil War tour. There is a reason why they hide the accurate actual artifacts / relics / evidence. Most of the actual artifacts were kept behind glass, but the rifle replicas were only behind a piece of rope. The kid was definitely old enough to read the signs warning people to not touch stuff and to stay within the tour zone. Saw a kid chip off a piece of an expensive sculpture. He was playing within the restricted area and his parents didn't bother. Edit. Just to clarify, I don't work as a tour guide, I was just a member of the tour. I also did not get to see if the family had to pay any penalty or fine. Make the parents pay for restoration. In most places, parents are responsible for the damage caused by minors. Not a tour guide, but in Pompeii, after surviving a volcano and nearly 2,000 years, I saw a bored kid chip stucco off a pillar. France at the Outdoor Odin Sculpture Museum. I got so angry at a kid kicking his socks ball against the sculptures. I took it away from him and scowling gave it to his mother. Looking back, I guess bronze sculptures exposed to nature element could probably survive a ball, but it was the principle of the thing. Yeah, definitely, I'm in awe of the stupidity of some people. How can you even get the idea to mess with something that's so old and precious? I'm careful handling anything that isn't mine, even if it's relatively inexpensive. Kudos to you for putting that kid in his place. I worked at a living history farm museum. I had a kid that was climbing on stuff the whole tour in the farmhouse and trying to get behind the smith in the blacksmith shop during a demo. After the tour, when people are allowed to roam the grounds, I hear his mom screaming and look over to the barn, and this kid has climbed the fence into the field with our longhorn oxen and is trying to poke them with a stick. I walk over and calmly told him to get out of the field before our lazy oxen decide they've had enough, but this jackoff decides to look me in the eye and smack Ted on the fanny with a stick, like it's a riding crop. Ted, bless him, just kinda jumps a little and whips his head around with a WTF dude look on his face. But seeing as he's a longhorn, he just wipes this kid out with one of his horns. When he turned his head, kid goes flying into the dirt and is having a meltdown. Mom is freaking out. I'm like, dude, get the hell out of the pen before Ted actually gets mad. So this kid is crying and trying to climb the fence out of the field, and Bill, who has been watching this whole thing, waits until the kid is almost over the fence and walks up to him and nudges him in the ass with his nose and pushes him off the top of the fence. It was everything I could do to keep from laughing. Kid was fine. Ted was fine. But the kid and his mom were promptly kicked out of the museum. Their dad and little sister were allowed to stay because she was well behaved and was just enjoying petting the goats at the petting zoo. So since the kid had to leave, but his sister didn't, there was a temper tantrum in the parking lot that could be heard all the way to the other side of the farm. But the oxen got some extra grain that night, so I guess they won in the end. I was on a tour with my family in Cambodia and we visited Angkor Wat. Now as everyone knows, Angkor Wat is teeming with tourists day and night. There was a long line to climb the Bakan, basically the topmost tower, wherein the steps are very steep. It was a hot day, and when it was almost our turn, a middle-aged man took 2 steps, fell backward and started having a seizure. People came to his help immediately. However, one man who was also crowding around him did nothing but pull out his cell phone and start recording. Thankfully, everyone noticed and started yelling at the guy to put that schwift away. He acted like the victim though, and he said he was just trying to help. What a jerk. Imagine deciding to film a guy having a seizure instead of calling him a freaking ambulance. Sick help bruh. Definitely a jerk. Tour guide at a university. Small group gets into our gardens, where there's a big turtle pond. Girl gets excited and wants a close-up of the largest snapping turtle. Girl loses her phone to the turtle and tries to get the university to buy her a new one. Girl was lucky she still has all her fingers. Guy peed on the side of an Omaha beach bunker. Not out of spite or something, he just didn't want to walk back to the porta potty. Started pissing on a piece of history. Obviously not the worst thing that'll be in this thread, but certainly made the rest of our group turn to him and ask what in the absolute frick he was doing. I told you chemical warfare is against the Geneva Convention. Somewhat relevant, there's a small hill on a pedestrian footpath outside my university. Once, I witnessed a Segway tour attempt to use this path. The first Segway slowed to a stop as it reached the top of this hill. The second Segway sped up in an attempt to make it over and crashed into the first Segway. One by one, each Segway crashed into the one in front of it, toppling over each other. The pathway now has a no bikes or Segway sign. Technically not a tourist guide, but I was doing a tour of our production facility to some people from head office. As we got to one of the pallet outfeeds, I mentioned the light curtain, which was a safety feature that stopped the conveyors once the light was broken, and so for some damn reason one of the ladies decides to stick her hand through the light to test it, stopping the production line and also risking her safety by doing it in the first place. I asked her not to do that again and went about resetting the machine to start up again. No more than 3 seconds after doing so, she stuck her hand through the curtain again, stopping everything. She looked at me with the most stupid expression on her face as I basically said, "What the fuck?" To this day I don't know why she did it or what her deal was. Chances are the first time round she wanted to see if it really worked. Second time round, you told her not to, so she did it cause you don't tell me what to do. Imagine being an 80-year-old in a 50-year-old woman's body. We are pretty good at stopping tourists from doing too much damage. After being in the industry for a while, you get a spidey sense for when people are going to do dumb things and can often steer them away from doing anything too bad. That being said, here's one of my favorite stories to tell. I was 7 months pregnant, and it was the week before I went on maternity leave. I was driving out to one of our sites, and to get there I had to drive on the road, of course, through our penguin colony. This particular species of penguin burrows underground and stays hidden in their burrow during the day and comes out at night when birds of prey and other potential predators have gone to sleep. As I'm driving out to the site, I realize the parking lot up ahead is full and people have started parking up and down the road. And that's when I see a giant SUV pull off the road, drive between the bollards, and into the penguin colony. I pull over as what seems like 20 non-English speaking tourists start to pile out of the vehicle and take selfies with the ocean backdrop. Staying as calm as possible and using sign language, I point out the no entry signs of the bollards they drove past. The burrows they have just collapsed. Inform them they may have killed penguins and to get their freaking vehicle out of the freaking colony. Once I got them out of there, I started digging out the collapsed burrows to check for penguins. The first 4 were luckily empty, but the last one had a breeding pair. I get the girl out, check her over for injuries, and having nowhere else to put her I follow protocol and tuck her under my left arm against my side. I get the boy out and put him in the same position on the right side and start to check him over. Remember how I said I was pregnant? Well, normally, you hold a penguin down low almost on your hip, but because of my round tummy I was holding him more at the bottom of my ribcage. So when I turned my head to start my health check, the bastard reached up and grabbed my top lip with his beak and ripped straight through the middle. It was about this time that the tourists walking along the road realized this ranger was holding on to 2 penguins. I had 5 or 6 tourists sprint through the colony towards me and start snapping pictures, while at the same time potentially collapsing more burrows. If any internet sleuths stumble across a picture of a heavily pregnant, pissed off looking ranger holding 2 penguins with blood pouring down her face, let me know. I've been waiting for that picture to show up for 3 years and haven't found it yet. Happy ending. I chased away the photographers, popped the 2 uninjured penguins in a nearby unoccupied burrow, and radioed for backup to help with the parking situation. My lip healed without a scar, and both penguins left the following morning for a well-deserved day in the ocean. TL. Doctor signage is there for a reason. Rules are there for a reason. If you don't know what the reason is, doesn't mean you should break the rules. Not a tour guide, but in my area we have Peggy's Cove. There are hundreds of signs and notices to stay off the black rocks, as you could be swept into the ocean and die. Without fail, tourists go on the black rocks, get swept in and Pikachu face. Some people have claimed there needs to be a fence, but overwhelmingly locals are against that because it would destroy the beauty. And if you try to tell tourists, they scoff at you like I get wanting to touch the ocean, but go to the beach. We have tons of them. Don't bring your toddlers and children so close, death. Now locals want there to be signs that state rescue costs will be borne by those disobeying the signs. Didn't happen to me, but one of my company's tour guides was on a flight with a bunch of middle schoolers. One of the boys got caught jerking it in his seat next to a girl who wasn't even from his school. I don't know what to say. What goes through your mind at that moment that makes you think that's a good idea? I work in a castle with some incredible old and delicate books and furniture. This bimbo of a tourist let her bratty kids run everywhere and grab/pull at everything. I had to get a child out from under one of the beds and she just didn't give a swift. Was at a reptile show and they let out some mini crocodile iguana type thing. I think it was called a dragon something. Anyway, some kid decides to take his shoe off and wiggle his toes through the small rope gate we were against. Presenter says, "Watch your kid, these will bite." Kid removes his foot and immediately puts it back in when presenter turns around, wiggles his toes again, and this dragon thing surges forward and clamps down. Kid starts screaming. Presenter just looks on like, "Well, I told you so," and removes it. Kid stops screaming, no one says anything, and presenter moves on. That's what you get for ignoring instructions, and also for not parenting properly. I work at a brewery taproom and take people on brewery tours. During fermentation, CO2 is produced and excess comes out through a runoff pipe and into a water bucket. One of the attendees, who was being a pain and trying to be funny but nobody was laughing, asked me what the pipe was for, so I gladly explained. He then asked what would happen if he breathed it in. In disbelief of his stupidity, I told him he would pass out/damage his brain. He then proceeded to grab the pipe and take a breath. He was then ejected and barred. Some people are just beyond belief. He must not have had a lot to worry about as far as brain damage goes. I used to work at a heritage site. It was an old military installation with a lot of remaining original structures, bunk beds, cafeteria equipment, computers, etc. Every day it was a constant effort to remind people, read, kids, not to jump on the beds, not to slam doors open, not to punch every button like it owes them money. The absolute worst was a group of kids on a school trip. Within the first 10 minutes we are walking through the tech portion of the exhibit, where we had a wall lined with Burroughs large systems machines, B5000s, all behind this little fence about waist high. I turned to demonstrate some of the pieces, and when I look back at the group, one of them had jumped over the barrier, opened one of the units, and started pulling out handfuls of digital tape from the reels inside. I just about jumped on the kid when their teacher did just that. She jumped the barrier, smacked the kid's hands, and took him outside. I immediately ended the tour and had them all refunded, as I couldn't imagine what else could happen. I watched a man run up the side of the platform the winged victory statue is on in the Louvre and throw his arm around it for a photo. Security got him down pretty quickly. I'm shocked he actually made it up there. I actually had a very hard time with the Louvre because of shit like this. So many camera flashes at point blank, people constantly touching shit that really shouldn't be touched. Everywhere I looked there was someone being a shithead to something irreplaceable. I was in the part that was still set up like a palace and came into a room to find some dude holding a 500-year-old Chinese tapestry up to his face and fucking rubbing it between his fingers. I lost it on him a bit, asking what the frick he was thinking, why he would do something like that, and his only response was "I wanted to see," and shrugging. Ultimately, I trust the folks that put stuff on exhibit to have weighed the risks of this sort of moron's impact vs the value of sharing access with the world, but holy hell does it make my blood boil. I had a guest snorkeling try and grab the tail of a barracuda as he swam up behind it. Luckily I was able to hit the guest with a dive fin from the boat to stop him before he got a hold. If he had grabbed on, I'm sure he would have been ripped to pieces by that fish. I bet he was mad you hit him too. You didn't save me, you ruined my death. I used to give walking tours of old Vegas back in the day. During one ill-fated March afternoon I had a group consisting of a mother and son, a British couple, a pair from Indiana, and a middle-aged man from China. Long story short, the Chinese man dropped his trousers and took a shit right on the sidewalk in front of the Golden Nugget without saying a word and carrying on as if nothing had happened. I just read an article that said that Chinese tourists are considered to be the worst in the world. So much so that they now offer classes in China on how to be a polite tourist in another country. One lesson they give them is how it is considered impolite to relieve yourself in any place other than a bathroom. I couldn't believe that had to actually be taught, but apparently it does. Go figure. My cousin is a tourist guide and biologist. Most of his tours are in Africa. He instructed his group of 20 to 25 people including kids not to wear any type of earrings or collars, especially shiny stuff, since they were about to go into a thick forest to try to see a bunch of animals. This is very important because 20 to 25 make a lot of noise which makes wild animals run away or hide. It's even worse if they are wearing shiny stuff they can spot from far away. Okay, so this woman complains, decides to wear shiny earrings anyway. Cousin tells her to get rid of them or she ain't coming with the group, so she obeys, but puts them on a bit later. Some species of monkeys in that area love shiny stuff. They rip the earrings from her ears. My cousin is a tourist guide and biologist. Most of his tours are in Africa. He instructed his group of 20 to 25 people including kids not to wear any type of earrings or collars, especially shiny stuff, since they were about to go into a thick forest to try to see a bunch of animals. This is very important because 20 to 25 make a lot of noise which makes wild animals run away or hide. It's even worse if they are wearing shiny stuff they can spot from far away. Okay, so this woman complains, decides to wear shiny earrings anyway. Cousin tells her to get rid of them or she ain't coming with the group, so she obeys, but puts them on a bit later. Some species of monkeys in that area love shiny stuff. They rip the earrings from her ears. I'm in the middle of talking and someone's phone rings. Okay, that happens sometimes, and usually they'd just cancel the call or step outside. Nope, this guy answers the call and starts talking on the phone, only a few meters from where I'm standing. I think, oh, he'll just quickly explain he's busy and end the call. Nope. He starts a conversation. The rest of the group glare at him, and I'm put in an awkward position because my workplace put a huge emphasis on politeness. So I suggest to him to continue his call in the hallway just outside the room we were in, to which he replied, "No, I'm fine here," and went back to his phone conversation. I'm doing my best to talk to the rest of the group, about 25 people, but he's so loud. Eventually this Chinese woman yells across the room at him, "Shut up, we want to listen to the lady, not you," which worked. But I just couldn't imagine the nerve to ruin everyone's experience like that, cause you're too selfish to talk on the phone outside. Also, the place I worked allowed photos, but had a strict no photos of the staff rule for privacy reasons. I always explained this at the start and 99% of people were cool. One day I had a particularly happy snapper who got right up in a staff member's face to take a photo, like I'm taking centimeters from his face to take a photo. The staffer was just some random middle-aged white dude, so I'm not sure why the fascination, but he was livid. It's like I saw it happen in slow motion, so couldn't do anything to stop it. That guy was removed from the tour. Okay guys, don't forget to hit that sub button, also ring that shiny bell, like and share too, and check out other videos in our channel.